The other lesson we've learned from COVID is that it has exposed the interlinkages between sectors. We learned that the closure of any of MSME is disastrous to other related MSMEs or businesses. For example, let's take an example of a school. When you close a school, it is interdependent on very many other actors around it. You close a school, you affect those that supply stationery. You affect financial institutions that give these schools loans. You affect the transporters. You affect the food market. During the rapid assessment that EPRC undertook, we actually found, or many vendors reported that they had supplied schools and had not been paid. So the closure of the school meant that these traders could not recoup, their capital, and many were running with less capital. So you can see that just the closure of a school has many it has multiplier effects on other related sectors. You can actually take any other example. For example, Chikubo. When you close Chikubo, you affect the whole chain of actors that supply or depend on Chikubo for survival. You affect transporters, you affect clearing agents, you affect the importers and all that. So what does that mean? It actually tells us that any measure that targets any of the players should have this wider or bigger picture of the likely effects at the macro level and not only to that specific player. The other lesson we learned from COVID is that it has tested governance and delivery systems. Look at and take an example of trust in government institutions. In the most concluded rapid survey, we actually learned that many stakeholders or actors in micro, small, and medium enterprises were wondering whether some of the promises will ever be fulfilled and when they will ever be fulfilled, if they had be fulfilled. In the aftermath of the first lockdown, that was last year, the government rolled out a number of interventions, including EMYOGA, including the support to private schools, the 20 billions for Teachers Circle. Then we have the most recent one during the second lockdown of the relief aid of 100,000. Now, these face two key challenges. One, that you have delays, that they come when most of the businesses have given up, or two, the small coverage, that you roll them out and very few people, or the scope is very small, that you do not help many that deserve or need this kind of support. The second issue that came out was prioritization. Take an example of revenue collection versus livelihood. An example is the fee, or rather the tax on fuel. Many petrol stations or fuel stations that were surveyed or that were visited during this rapid assessment reported that the tax, the 100 shilling addition per liter of fuel had far-reaching effects, especially during this time of lockdown when the demand is so low and purchasing power is very low. So they said when you impose this, when they are struggling, it affects especially the small fuel stations who are at the risk of closure. The related one is the tax on data. Now we realized that when the lockdown hit, the physical interaction was reduced significantly and many people went digital. So most of the businesses that had switched to digital platforms to enhance or to maintain their customers were actually suffered when the tax was imposed. Now what does this tell us? You realize that when you impose a tax in times like this, depending on what you're taxing, you actually risk eliminating some of the players from the industry. And many businesses, especially those that are relying on digital platforms, are likely to close because of that. Now, the other text to governance systems and delivery mechanism is the exclusion of some of the interventions. I'll give an example of the most recent relief aid, the 100,000 that was sent to different individuals, vulnerable individuals. Now, in many communities we went to, I'll take an example of Chigwanya, LC1, this is in Busega, it's a slum area. We had a conversation with the secretary to the local council who told us that many people, vulnerable people in her LC1, actually do not have phones. And many of them were even not registered, they did not have NIN. Yet the requirement was that one had to have a phone and then you have to register your NIN. So she explained that many of her people were not registered. what you would call the poorest of the poor were not registered because they did not meet the criteria. So the targeting can actually be can exclude some of the key people that deserve such an intervention.